A slim young woman approached a man who clearly wasn't in the mood for company. This guy wasn't just anyone. He was a well-known Italian mob boss, infamous for his ruthlessness. But at that moment, he wasn't paying her or her charms the slightest bit of attention. The atmosphere shifted when a hitman walked into the villa. This assassin had the audacity to ask for his payment, even though he hadn't finished the job he was hired to do. The mob boss was furious, declaring that a hitman who doesn't finish the job isn't worth a dime. Trying isn't enough, he growled. The person he wanted dead at all costs? None other than Philip, a ghost-like hitman played by Sean Gunnan. Their tangled history went way back 6 years ago, to be exact. Back then, a massive explosion in the U.S. left 25 bodies scattered near a hospital. It was chaos. All the victims had been gunned down, but there wasn't a single clue pointing to the shooter. The word on the street was that a Serbian gang leader named Dimitri, who happened to be the mob boss's brother, was among the dead. The FBI zeroed in on Philip, a former CIA operative turned rogue assassin. But despite knowing who he was, they couldn't catch him. 6 years later, in a quiet Italian town called Bari, a plan to take out Philip was set in motion. Snipers took up positions on rooftops, and other assassins lurked nearby, ready to strike. Philip, unaware of the trap, was enjoying his quiet retirement. Stepping outside with a cup of coffee, Philip accidentally bumped into one of the assassins. The moment was brief, but it was enough for Philip's instincts to kick in. With his years of experience, he could sense something was off. He told his daughter to stay sharp, warning her about a delivery guy across the street who seemed too interested in them. Philip, playing it cool, walked back into the cafe and casually asked the suspicious man for a cigarette. Before the guy could react, Philip struck, catching him off guard. The assassin tried to draw his gun, but Philip had already disabled it. When Philip noticed his daughter in danger, he grabbed a gun and quickly took the guy out. The sniper, meanwhile, missed his shot, giving Philip and his daughter a chance to escape through the back. The chase continued through narrow streets and eventually to a seaside market. The killers were relentless, but Philip wasn't an easy target. In one swift move, he yanked a driver out of his car and took control. His daughter, showing she could hold her own, grabbed a submachine gun and shot 2 attackers. It was her first time killing, though, and the emotional toll hit her hard. The leader of the operation was fuming over their failures. Meanwhile, Philip decided they needed to go back to their apartment to grab IDs and cash before disappearing. He told his daughter to stand guard while he slipped inside. Making sure there were no surprises waiting, he found the documents. But just as he was about to leave, the assassin showed up. Thanks to his daughter's heads-up, Philip was ready. Using a nail as a weapon, he disabled one attacker in brutal fashion, stabbing him in the gut, then driving the nail into his neck. Another assassin tried to ambush him, but Philip was quicker. Using a mirror to spot them, he fired first, killing both. After dealing with the threat, he reunited with his daughter, and they fled. In the car, Philip handed her the killer's phone. There was a photo of him on it, which puzzled him. His information wasn't in any government databases, so who had leaked his location? He needed answers. They spent the night in a dingy motel, breaking into a room to rest. The next day, they set off for Philip's hometown in Slovenia. There, they met Goran, Philip's brother. The reunion was warm, but tense. Goran revealed that 2 days earlier, a group of armed men stormed the village, threatening the locals and demanding to know where Philip was. The mob boss Vlad, Dimitri's brother, was behind the raid. The villagers were too scared to speak, but just when things seemed bleak, Lydia, a brave young woman, rode in on her motorcycle. She offered to give up Philip's location if the hostages were released. Then, catching everyone off guard, she grabbed a gun, shot one of the men, and made her escape. To protect Lydia and the village, Goran had no choice but to reveal Philip's whereabouts. Philip understood his brother had acted out of necessity. Thankfully, Lydia had made it home safely. Lydia later asked Philip what he had done to provoke such a relentless pursuit. When she learned he had killed Vlad's brother, Dimitri, she wasn't entirely surprised. Dimitri had been a terrible person, and his death had been for the greater good. Still, everyone knew Vlad wouldn't back down. Meanwhile, back at Vlad's luxurious mansion in northern Italy, his men reported their failure. Vlad wasn't shocked. If Philip were easy to eliminate, Dimitri wouldn't have died. Vlad vowed to end things once and for all, knowing Philip would likely come for him next. Philip was already planning his move. He and his daughter contacted Holt, an associate who had once tasked Philip with killing Dimitri. This time, they sought Holt's advice on dealing with Vlad. Holt warned that Vlad's fortress-like villa would be nearly impossible to infiltrate, let alone survive. But Philip wasn't discouraged. His plan was to lure Vlad out. Vanessa, his daughter, discovered that Vlad had a $500 million cryptocurrency ledger hidden in a private bank. If they could get their hands on it, they could bait Vlad. Holt reached out to a tech-savvy partner named Sanders to find the bank. Tempted by the money, Sanders agreed to help, demanding a cut of the profits. Soon, she tracked down the bank, a tiny, unassuming place just a couple of kilometers from Vlad's mansion. The bank was a front, holding dirty money, including Vlad's fortune. With the target identified, Philip and his daughter disguised themselves and checked into a nearby hotel. The stage was set for their next move. The battle against Vlad was about to escalate, and Philip was determined to finish what he'd started. Holt got a fancy hotel suite for the father-daughter duo, giving them a good vantage point to keep an eye on the bank. Vanessa quickly picked up on the bank's routine. It ran from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., and there weren't many visitors. The security was surprisingly light, with just one armed guard at the entrance. Vanessa began brainstorming how to get inside unnoticed. The next morning, she went undercover, dressing like a wealthy aristocrat. Once inside, she played her part perfectly, convincing the manager she was recommended by Vlad and had diamonds to store. Intrigued, the manager showed her the vault. While Vanessa gathered all the intel she needed, the next step became clear. They need to blow the vault open to get the ledger. Vanessa prepped fake South African diamonds and a plan to plant a bomb in the vault. A frequency jammer was also in the mix to mess with the cameras. The bank's clientele mostly consisted of shady characters, so ironically, it lacked high-end security measures. Meanwhile, Vlad was dealing with his own frustrations. One of his hired killers came demanding payment, but Vlad, unimpressed, reminded him Philip was still alive. Payment for failure? Not happening. The hitman didn't live long enough to argue. Back to the father and daughter. Everything was ready for the heist. But they didn't realize Holt was double-dealing. He had contacted Vlad, offering Philip's location in exchange for $25 million. Vlad, furious about Philip targeting his vault, gathered his forces and headed straight for the bank. Vanessa, now inside, played her role smoothly, dodging suspicion even when the manager asked to inspect her diamonds. Her charm worked like a charm, and soon she was in the vault. With the manager knocked out cold, Vanessa planted the bomb, detonated it, and snagged the cryptocurrency ledger. 2 guards rushed in, but she handled them with ease and walked out casually, hopping on a waiting motorcycle. Holt, keeping tabs from a distance, orchestrated the movements of the reinforcements. Everything seemed to be going as planned. Holt then grabbed his briefcase and left the suite, meeting Vanessa shortly after to retrieve the ledger. Philip, however, had his own plan. He infiltrated Vlad's mansion in disguise, quietly taking out guards. In the control room, a security officer spotted Philip on the cameras and warned Vlad's girlfriend. The alarm was raised, but Philip stayed one step ahead. While this chaos unfolded, Lydia was in a tight spot. Cornered and outnumbered, she surrendered. When the thugs searched her, they found nothing, as Vanessa had the real prize. Back at the mansion, Vlad confronted Philip. The mob boss was ready for a showdown, but Philip had already planned his next move. Lydia was brought in as leverage. Vlad demanded Philip leave immediately, threatening Lydia's life if he didn't comply. Reluctantly, Philip backed off for now. Meanwhile, Holt handed over what Vlad thought was the real ledger. But Philip had anticipated Holt's betrayal and had given him a fake. When Vlad realized he'd been duped, his temper flared. Philip called Vlad, setting up a meeting in a remote village to exchange Lydia for the ledger. Philip and Vanessa regrouped, knowing the rescue would be risky. Goran, Philip's brother, suggested evacuating the villagers to a monastery for safety. While preparing for the operation, they uncovered an old stash of weapons, including a few rocket launchers, though their condition was questionable. The showdown in the village was intense. Vlad arrived with Lydia as his hostage, ordering his men to hunt down Philip. Forced to reveal himself, Philip appeared, and Vanessa, hidden in the shadows, waited for her chance to strike. The exchange began, but as expected, Vlad had no intention of letting anyone go. Suddenly, Lydia elbowed her captor and made a break for it. Philip and Vanessa seized the opportunity, opening fire. Chaos erupted as bullets flew. Lydia, however, was caught again, while Vanessa's relentless firepower kept enemies at bay. Amid the commotion, Holt grabbed the ledger and tried to escape. Vanessa pursued him, leading to a brutal hand-to-hand fight. Holt, a former Interpol officer, proved to be a tough opponent, knocking her down. But Philip arrived just in time, taking Holt down and ensuring the ledger wouldn't leave with him. Meanwhile, Vlad, severely injured, tried to escape but ran straight into an angry armed villager, meeting his end in a fit of poetic justice. Holt managed to flee the village, but his plans were in ruins. The ledger was destroyed during the fight. Unbeknownst to him, Vanessa had already made a copy of the ledger. She now had enough resources to live comfortably for the rest of her life. The villagers celebrated their victory with music and dance, relieved to have survived the ordeal. As the dust settled, Philip and Vanessa reflected on what they had endured, knowing they had outsmarted their enemies and emerged victorious.